Hello everyone, and thank you for this opportunity to present at OER20, the Care in Openness. This project, YourMOOC4all, a joint project between the Open University and UNED. The presentation we've named it as applying UDL to evaluate MOOCs, designing for inclusion. We're going to present the project, but first we're starting with the links with Open Education and our universities, distant universities, and two biggest universities in Europe in distant education. At the Open University, we have OpenLearn, which is a Moodle-based site which provides free access to more than 1,000 courses, plus articles and videos. And the OU publishes curriculum as source courses onto OpenLearn, and as well creates free badges, open courses for informal learners that can have a badge and a certificate of achievement. And as well, OpenLearn has links with the BBC broadcastings and includes quite a lot of material since its creation. Has more than 7.8 million new learners each year, so it's very used, and total since it was launched in 2006 of more than 60 million users. FutureLearn is the MOOC platform created by the OU in 2012. Nowadays it's owned by Open University, half of it is, as I said, for MOOCs, so massive scale learning, and has a total of more than 186 UK international partners providing MOOCs in FutureLearn. You can access it through mobile devices, and it's thought and is designed to learn through conversation, and that's the FutureLearn paradigm of studying and learning. Has more than 3 million learners and more than 250 online courses at this point. When considering UNED has UNED Abierta, which is an open edX platform. It's a OER repository launched in 2011, has extensive collections of open educational resources that can be and are varied, including MOOCs from many different teams, and audiovisual podcasts, electronic books, databases, radio programs. So it has quite a lot of different and varied materials in Spanish, having more than 100 full online courses. So these are some examples of what the universities in this project have and are doing in terms of OERs or MOOCs and online materials. But when we think about inclusion in these online resources outside the educational system, we have to consider that they can bring some benefits, such as openness, low cost, the possibility to work at your own time and place at home, the fact you can acquire new knowledge and have some social learning, achieve new competencies, and develop yourself professionally. So some of the benefits that could improve the inclusion in using this type of courses. But we have to realize that open learning is not designed with the capacity to attend to the needs of all students, and that's a big problem. We want to keep them open to all. So accessibility is a problem because there is a lack of support in terms of poor compliance with accessibility standards. There is a lack of information about accessibility preferences in these courses, and you can find many barriers on third-party software and social networks. Some examples of those barriers can be the platforms. So we have the situation that they are web-based learning engines, so they can create these accessibility barriers in terms of standardization of the content. It has the curriculum schedule in these courses, so you have to follow a pattern of dates and deadlines which not everyone can follow, and as well has different types of tools to communicate between learners, and the academics can be synchronous or asynchronous, and they have to be taken into consideration. There are barriers that can be found when using processes of registration and login, the way you can navigate in the courses and its educational resources, and the specific technology is used in the educational resources and the materials. So I do have to consider those interface elements can be influencing the accessibility of the components, and how students and how learners interact with these objects, and there is not always a consistency in example in different platforms, the way forums or discussions are used, the way elements are designed for the test and quizzes, the way the videos are being made accessible, or different types of formats for documents and text-based files. So considering our project, which the link is there of our prototype, YourMOOC4all, is, as I said at the beginning, a joint research between IET and UNED, the Computer Science School at UNED, and IET at the OU. The idea is to fill a gap. So when Covadonga and myself we were attending OE Global 2015 in Canada, we realized that there were quite a lot of these feedback providers, like those aggregator sites with lots of information regarding MOOCs and their pedagogical approach to find out courses that were of your interest. So we realized that there is no information regarding accessibility, and we have to make that public and ensure learners with accessibility needs can access the platform and the educational resources. So we need to provide access to learners, and we need to reduce the quantity of amount that is available, and focus on key information that might be useful for them, and provide a recommender systems. So we are trying to provide with YourMOOC4all a tool that actually recommends courses for the learners. So we realize as well that the learners who are providing these recommendations claim feedback from previous learners is actually critical, and it's important to provide accurate recommendations. So at the moment, YourMOOC4all is a multi-language aggregator site that has more than 700 MOOCs from 3 providers in the Spanish language. UNED Abierta, which has been previously explained, MiriadaX, which is the biggest provider in Spanish and Portuguese, and Coursera, which is a US-based provider with lots of courses in Spanish. And in this case, so as I said, the idea is that it's very similar to those aggregator sites such as Class Central, MOOClist, or CourseTalk. So their learners can add feedback about the MOOCs they are participating in and receive recommendations. So we have to realize that last year there were more than 13,000 MOOCs, and from more than 1,000 universities which were developing these courses worldwide and online. And the way we organize the feedback of such a range, big, wide range of participants has to be important to allow recommendations and think about how it's going to be useful for our learners. So this is a bit the look and feel of the main page of the MOOC4all, where basically top left you can type your search, and you can include several filters, the title, the institution, so which university who is providing the course, the platforms, and the score. And this is important because it's about the learning design, and we're going to explain that part of the project now. So in YourMOOC4all we have a learner-centered approach. In this case, and in this pilot in Spanish, and those students who declare accessibility needs, and allows the possibility to harvest, as I said, more than 700 courses in Spanish from 3 providers, and it's already been piloted with UNED students in a bachelor degree course. The idea is to match user expectations with the learning needs of that person, so that's something related with the profile, and it follows a universal design for learning, and that's the way the framework we have used to evaluate the courses, and has 2 important bits raising the recommendations through artificial intelligence and social networking for recommendations. So that's important thing, using the semantics and using recommendation between different peers. So the way it's designed and is thought about is to help students and recommend courses which are of his or her interest in terms of as well professional development. So the idea is we have two parts of the profile, which are the preferences, the assistive technologies and accessibility needs of the student, plus which are the professional competencies to achieve, so which are the courses of interest of the student. And that means having a link with the different types of professional profiles, and as well having information coming from the data of all those courses related to the competencies that can be achieved, and that's the match to be able to recommend systems, and considering the accessibility data of those courses. So that would be the two important things to find in these courses to be able to provide recommendations. So going to the UDL part, the Universal Design for Learning, this came from my PhD research. This slide is just a summary of my PhD, where I was trying to answer 3 research questions. And if we think about the third one, how can MOOCs be made accessible for disabled learners? And the third study of my research, accessibility audit, we realized that I was using UDL to evaluate the pedagogical aspects. So in terms of evaluating accessibility of MOOCs, I was using a 4 steps approach. It was heuristic evaluation, user experience, using Walthrop and design in learning, universal design for learning, and the quality of design. So those 4 different steps allow to have a lot of information redundancy about MOOCs and their accessibility in many different aspects, technical plus pedagogical. So when we're evaluating UDL, I was using a structure which is defined at the bottom of the slide. So trying to understand and evaluate the guideline and the checkpoint, and trying to find information of what to evaluate to be sure the accessibility was being achieved in terms of universal design for learning. And that means there were 4 different options to evaluate the accessibility. So it's not achieved, the feature is missing. It's partially achieved, the feature to test is available but not integrated into the learning design. Largely achieved, the feature to test is available and partially integrated to learning design. Or fully achieved, the feature to test is available and fully integrated to learning design. So that was a way to think about how useful UDL could be to flag accessibility barriers, and as well it was a feature that the platform should have implemented in the learning design of the courses. And even this was designed for evaluating when the MOOC was already being run. It's very important and consistent to consider where we are designing the MOOCs. So there is this option to provide feedback. So the system, YourMOOC4all, has the following aims. So provide information to MOOC developers and recommendations to learners. So it's not only the fact that we have this information to recommend learners accessible MOOCs, is that we can provide information that is going to be useful for those providers, for those who are designing the courses. And it allows to support learner evaluation and become and make expert learners using UDL framework. So learners can retrieve a recommendation validated with both UDL principles and peers feedback. And another important value is that learner is allowed to include free text. So that's going to be very useful for students, for learners to see information from other peers and having something more than just scores. And have more qualitative data as well for us to understand what's the accessibility of courses, and that's really helpful because we are talking about thousands of feedback. So your MOOC4 is following UDL, so with the idea to develop expert learners, and this is important, and this is something we're framing UDL is in order to be successful expert learners, they need to be able to recognize tools and resources that help them to learn. That's the strategic aspects, organize tools and resources to facilitate the learning, that's the resourceful part, and evaluate the design of MOOCs and they take. That's the motivation bit, the motivate. And this pilot that we have now in YourMOOC4 was designed as a end project in a bachelor degree, 2017-18 academic year, and we already tested it with UNED students last year. When thinking about UDL, and I'm gonna go over it quite quick because I think we probably are familiar in UDL has three main areas: the recognition network, strategic networks, and affecting networks that indeed have 9 principles. Sorry, 3 principles and 9 guidelines and 31 check points or checklist. So basically, provide multiple means of representation. So we have to provide options for perception, options for language, mathematical expressions and symbols, and options for comprehension. While in terms of action and expression, we have to consider options for physical action, options for expression and communication, and options for executive functions. Provide options for recruiting interest in terms of engagement, options for sustaining effort and persistence, and as well options for self-regulation. So it covers a wide range of options in terms of reflection for learners to consider which are the key points and for designing courses that are really offering a varied ways of accessible representation, engagement with the students, and allow the learners to work with direction expressions themselves, so they can be goal-directed learners, knowledgeable learners, and motivated learners. So these are just some examples to consider when thinking about. So the option to offer alternatives for visual information, providing options for languages and symbols in the courses, the ways to provide options for comprehension, and a way to offer personalized and accessible self-learning experience to learners. So in YourMOOC4all, these are the key 9 aspects in our UDL-based questionnaire, so the ones that we have to consider. So originally we have 31 indicators, 1 per checklist, but we realized that's very difficult to manage for learners. There is a lot of evaluate in each of them, and that's very rich in information, but very unpractical in terms of having a big platform. So in terms of engagement, so we have to consider the engagement of participants in discussion and activities. As well, the way suggestions to allow learners to formulate goals. So the way in discussion between peers feedback is provided and oriented. As well, we consider the way and help when it is unable to participate in the MOOC and how that's represented in the courses. The standardization around adaptability of the educational environment. As well, if there are guidelines to provide consistent and straightforward language, structure, style, and terminology. The orientation on explicit prior knowledge, concepts, and sequential ordering of tasks is very relevant at the beginning of the MOOC. The configurations to avoid time limits and access the platform in a varied ways. The use of guidelines to provide use of social networks, external links, and complementary readings between the courses, and indicators of indication of a calendar. So there has to be available activities, the progress you are making in the course, the provision of courses to facilitate reflection, and guidelines to help the learning process. So all these kind of new key aspects that are going to be evaluated in the course to provide recommendations based on UDL framework to students are already in place. As I said, at the moment, still with the 31 checklist has to be taken upper level with only 9 to make it easier, but this is an example of how it is organized and how the information is available in terms of materials. So that information on the left side about the course that is already harvested, and on the right side we can see the evaluations and the way all the checklists can be graded using 5 Likert scale, and every kind of question has some extra information for learners to do the evaluations and have the manual information and qualitative information that can be added, and we can see at the top down right of the figure. So what's the future work we have to do in this project? And I'm going quite quick through this. Is that we have already the UDL bit there, but we need an enriched user profile which grabs the device preference and the assistive technologies disable data and the way we can recommend that. And so every learner has different needs, and we have to consider that when using this artificial intelligence approach. So we have already done a research in different standards that are already available. And important thing is metadata. So metadata is the one that is going to allow us to save and record information regarding preferences of learners in terms of accessibility. So there are quite a lot of different standards, and which allow to tag and add information about the learner profile and how to tag and add metadata in the learning resources. So it's bidirectional. So information has to be tagged in both areas so they can match the preferences of learners. So the preferred one, and the one we think is at the moment the most useful one, is IMS, Access for All, AFA. So it allows to record personal needs and preferences, PMP, and digital resources description, DRD. So they are the two sides. And those are on the figure on the right, some of the metadata that is needed to be gathered to match both sides of the profiling and the preferences. So it will allow us to find the accommodation needed, the accessibility needed that the students, the learners are providing in the profile, and match them with the educational resources. So that means having our profile, that we can add metadata in the user profile, and we can as well add metadata in the different bits that are linked with educational resources and the recommendations based on the information we already are harvesting from the courses that include, as we saw in the previous figure of the course, we already have quite a lot of information regarding, for example, subtitles, transcripts, and accessibility requirements, plus information regarding the content of the course, so more about the competencies to achieve if the course has to do with artificial intelligence, with machine learning, or any other type of social science that might be the interest of the students. So these are some of the references that are based in this project. We've already been working for a while in YourMOOC4all, and as well thinking about ways to improve accessibility and match between standards and using UDL. Here you have the link again and information to contact us. Thank you very much. I hope the information was useful, and we'll be happy to discuss more about YourMOOC4all with any of you.